I work at a cafe in Amsterdam. An American couple ordered coffee and stroopwafels. The woman asked how I liked working there. I said, it's fine. The hours are long and the pay could be better, but the location is nice. She looked horrified. Her husband leaned over and whispered, just smile and nod. She asked if I was okay, if I needed help, if my boss was abusive. I was confused. My boss was standing right there and laughed. She asked a question. I gave an answer. The woman said, but you're supposed to say you love it here. I shrugged. Why would I lie? They left without finishing their stroopwafels. My coworker served an American family last week. The dad asked, how's the apple pie? She said, not our best dessert. The crust is too thick today. He demanded to see the manager. When my boss arrived, he explained that in America, servers always say everything is excellent. My boss said, then why ask? The man had no answer. He ordered the apple pie anyway, ate half, then said, she was right about the crust. An American tourist asked me for restaurant recommendations. I suggested 3 places, then added, avoid the Italian place on the corner. Tourist trap. Terrible food, high prices. She thanked me, then went to the Italian place anyway. She came back the next day and said, you were right. I said, I know. She looked shocked that I didn't apologize for being blunt. Here's the thing about the Netherlands. We don't sugarcoat. We don't cushion. We don't pretend. And for Americans, this is apparently terrifying. I manage a clothing store in Rotterdam. An American woman tried on a dress. It didn't fit well. She asked, how does this look? I said, the color is nice, but it's too tight in the shoulders. Try the next size up. She went pale. Her friend rushed over and said, what did you say to her? I repeated it. The friend said, you can't just tell someone they look bad. I said, I didn't. I said the dress doesn't fit properly. That's not the same thing. They left. 30 minutes later, they came back. The woman bought the dress in the larger size. As she paid, she said, I'm still processing what happened. I said, you asked. I answered, you look better now. She laughed, but I could tell she was still rattled. Last month, an American asked me to recommend jeans. I showed him our options. He tried on a pair and asked my opinion. I said, they make your legs look short. Try the dark wash instead. He actually backed away from me, physically stepped back. He said, in America, you'd be fired for that. I said, for helping you look better? He bought the dark wash jeans. Left a review saying I was shockingly honest but technically correct. An American couple came in shopping for a wedding outfit. The bride asked if a white blazer worked with her skin tone. I said, no. It washes you out. Try the cream or the pale blue. She teared up. The groom said I was being cruel. I was baffled. I showed her the cream blazer. She looked beautiful. She bought it. As they left, she said, I don't know if I should thank you or report you. I said, you should thank me. You look stunning now. She did thank me, but she looked confused the entire time. I work in a bookshop in Utrecht. An American came in looking for Dutch history books. I recommended 3. He asked if one was better than the others. I said, this one is more thorough, but it's dense. You'll need patience. This one is lighter but skips some important context. This one is the best balance. He stared at me. You're not supposed to point out flaws. I said, you asked which was better. I can't answer honestly without explaining the differences. He bought the balanced one. Came back a week later and said, you were completely right, but the way you said it made me think you hated all 3 books. I said, I don't hate them. I just told you the truth. He said, that's what's weird. A woman asked if we had a book in stock. I checked. We didn't. I said, no, but the shop 2 streets over does. They're cheaper too. She looked stunned. You're sending me to a competitor? I said, You want the book. They have it. Why would I waste your time? She said, but what about your sale? I said, I'd rather you get what you need. She stood there for a full minute trying to process this. Then she said, this is the weirdest customer service I've ever experienced. She went to the other shop, bought the book, then came back to buy something else from us because, as she said, I feel like I owe you for being so helpful. I told her she didn't owe us anything. That seemed to confuse her even more. An American book club came in looking for recommendations. They asked what was popular. I said, these 3 are popular, but I wouldn't recommend them. They're overhyped. These 2 are better written and more interesting. One woman said, don't you want to sell us the popular ones? I said, I want you to enjoy what you read. Otherwise, you won't come back. They bought the ones I recommended. 2 weeks later, they returned and said every book was excellent. Then one asked, why don't American bookshops do this? I said, I don't know. Seems inefficient. I teach English as a second language in The Hague. An American joined our conversation group. He spoke Dutch fairly well but made consistent grammar mistakes. After class, I told him, your vocabulary is strong, but you're mixing up de and het words. Here's a list to practice. He looked like I'd slapped him. He said, I thought I was doing well. I said, you are doing well. You'd do better if you fixed this. He said, but you didn't start with a compliment. I was confused. You want me to compliment you before giving you useful information? He said, that's how feedback works. I said, that's inefficient. Now you know what to improve. He stopped coming to classes. 3 weeks later, he sent an email saying my harsh criticism had demotivated him. I replied, I gave you one correction and a practice list. That's not harsh. That's helpful. He wrote back, you don't understand American communication. I wrote, you're in the Netherlands. Learn Dutch communication. He never responded. My Dutch students thought the whole thing was bizarre. One said, Americans want you to lie to them first, then tell the truth? Why? An American woman joined a business Dutch course. She gave a presentation. It was okay but not great. Her pronunciation was off, and her sentence structure was awkward. After she finished, she asked, how was that? I said, your confidence was good. Your pronunciation needs work, especially with the G sound. And you used English sentence structure instead of Dutch. Practice with these exercises. She went silent. After class, she said, you embarrassed me in front of everyone. I said, I answered your question. You asked how you did. I told you. She said, you're supposed to say something nice first. I said, I did. I said your confidence was good. She said, that's not enough nice. I had no idea what enough nice meant. She filed a complaint with the school. My supervisor, who is Dutch, read it and laughed. He told her, this is how we teach. If you want only positive feedback, this isn't the right program for you. She stayed in the class. Her Dutch improved significantly over 3 months. On the last day, she admitted, I hated your approach at first, but I learned more here than anywhere else. I said, I know. That's why we do it this way. She said, you're still very blunt. I said, yes. She laughed and said, at least you're consistent. I work at a gym in Eindhoven. An American signed up for personal training. First session, I assessed his form on basic exercises. His squat form was terrible. I stopped him. Your knees are caving in. Your back is rounding. You'll injure yourself. Let's fix this. He stood up and said, wow, okay. That was a lot. I said, would you prefer I let you hurt yourself? He said, I'd prefer you be a little gentler about it. I said, gentle doesn't fix bad form. Correct information does. He looked overwhelmed. After the session, he said, I'm not sure I can handle this. I said, handle what? Learning properly. He said, "The way you deliver feedback. It's intense." I said, "It's clear. There's a difference." He kept training with me. 2 months later, his form was perfect. He told me, "I almost quit after the first session." I said, "I know. Your face showed it." He said, "But now I get it. You actually cared about teaching me right, not just making me feel good." I said, "Feeling good doesn't prevent injuries. Proper form does." He said, "American trainers would have let me keep doing it wrong just to keep me happy." I said, "That's not training. That's babysitting." He comes 3 times a week now. He told his American friends about me. Half of them signed up. Half said I sounded too mean. An American couple started CrossFit classes. During their first class, I corrected the husband's deadlift form 3 times. After class, his wife pulled me aside. "Could you be less critical of him? He's sensitive." I said, "He's lifting wrong. He could hurt his back." She said, "But maybe phrase it nicer." I said, "Nice phrasing won't protect his spine. Correct form will." She said, "This is why people say Europeans are cold." I said, "We're not cold. We're practical." They switched to a different gym. I heard later that the husband hurt his back doing deadlift. His wife sent me an email. No words, just a screenshot of his injury report. I work front desk at a hotel in Amsterdam. An American checked in and asked, "What's the best thing to do in the city?" I said, "Depends on what you like." He said, "Just tell me the best thing." I said, "There's no universal best. Some people love the museums. Some prefer the canals. Some want the nightlife. What interests you?" He got frustrated. "Why can't you just give me one answer?" I said, "Because I don't know you. I can't tell you what's best for you without knowing what you enjoy." He said, "In America, you just say the museums." I said, "Even if you hate museums?" He paused. "Well, yeah." I said, "That's not helpful. That's just easy." He eventually told me he liked history and architecture. I gave him 3 specific recommendations. The next day, he said everything was perfect. Then he added, "But it was weird how much effort it took to get an answer from you." I said, "It took effort because I wanted to give you the right answer, not just an answer." Last week, an American couple asked where to eat dinner. I asked what kind of food they wanted. They said, "What do you recommend?" I said, "I need to know what you like first. Dutch food? Indonesian? Italian? Seafood?" The woman said, "Just tell us where you eat." I said, "I eat at home mostly. When I go out, I go to a Surinamese place. But that doesn't mean it's right for you." The husband said, "You're overthinking this. Just pick something." I said, "I'd rather ask 3 questions and give you one good answer than guess wrong and waste your evening." They seemed annoyed but told me they like seafood and preferred quieter places. I recommended a specific restaurant. They went there, came back raving about it. The husband said, "Okay, fine. You were right to ask questions." I said, "I know." An American family asked about day trip. I asked how far they wanted to travel and what they'd enjoyed so far. The father said, "Why are you interrogating us? Just tell us where to go." I said, "I'm not interrogating you. I'm trying to help you not waste your time." The teenage daughter laughed and said, "Dad, she's just being efficient." The father grumbled but answered my questions. I suggested Harlem for architecture and beaches. They went. Loved it. When they checked out, the father said, "I apologize for calling it an interrogation." I said, "No need. You didn't know how we work here." He said, "Still getting used to people just saying exactly what they think." I said, "It saves time." He said, "It saves time, but it's jarring." I said, "You'll adjust." I work in IT support in Amsterdam. An American called about his laptop. I asked what the problem was. He said, "It's running slow." I asked, How many programs do you have running at once? He said, I don't know. A lot. I said, close half of them. That's probably the issue. He said, that's it? That's your solution? I said, if it works, yes. Call me back if it doesn't. He said, you're not going to troubleshoot anything else? I said, why would I troubleshoot other things before testing the obvious solution? He said, because that's what tech support does. I said, inefficient tech support maybe. He hung up, called back an hour later. It worked. I said, good. He said, you could have been nicer about it. I said, I could have wasted 15 minutes testing other things first. Would that have been nicer? He paused. No, I guess not. I said, exactly. An American woman called because her email wasn't working. I asked if she'd checked her password. She said, obviously. I asked her to type it in while I was on the phone. She'd been spelling it wrong. I said, reset your password. Type it carefully this time. She said, you don't have to be rude about it. I said, I wasn't rude. I told you the solution. She said, your tone was rude. I said, my tone was efficient. There's a difference. She said, in America, you'd apologize for implying I made a mistake. I said, but you did make a mistake. Why would I apologize for that? She had no answer. She reset her password. It worked. She sent a feedback survey later. She rated me 5 stars for effectiveness and 2 stars for warmth. My supervisor showed me and laughed. Sounds about right. An American man called about printer issues. I asked if he'd checked the paper tray. He said yes. I asked if he'd checked for paper jams. He said yes. I asked if the printer was turned on. Long silence. Then, oh. I said, turn it on. Call back if that doesn't work. He said, you don't need to make me feel stupid. I said, I didn't. You said you checked everything, but you hadn't checked the power. That's just a fact. He said, but the way you said it. I said it neutrally. How you feel about it is separate from what I said. He hung up. Never called back. The printer probably works now. I bartended in Amsterdam. An American ordered a beer. Asked how my day was. I said, long busy. My feet hurt. But the tips have been decent. He looked uncomfortable. You're supposed to say good. I said, why? You asked how my day was, not how I want you to think my day was. He said, but that's just what you say. I said, in America, maybe. Here, we answer honestly. He said, what if I don't actually want to know? I said, then don't ask. He sat there for a moment, processing. Then he said, so when you ask someone how they are, you actually want to know? I said, yes. Otherwise, what's the point of asking? He said, in America, it's just a greeting. I said, that's bizarre. You waste time asking questions you don't want answered. He laughed. When you put it that way, yeah, it's pretty weird. He came back every night for a week. Last night, he said, I think I'm starting to get it. You're not mean. You're just honest. I said, exactly. He said, but it's still shocking every time. I said, you'll adjust. He said, do I have to? I said, only if you want to understand the Netherlands. He said, I think I do. Look, here's the thing about Dutch directness. It's not about being rude. It's not about being cold. It's about efficiency, clarity, and respect. We respect you enough to tell you the truth. We don't waste your time with pleasantries that mean nothing. We don't sugarcoat because we trust you can handle reality. And yeah, for Americans raised on, the customer is always right and always say everything is great, this feels like chaos. But once you adjust, you realize it's actually simpler. You always know where you stand. Compliments mean something because we don't give them unless we mean them. Criticism is useful because it's designed to help, not hurt. So if you're visiting the Netherlands, here's my advice. When a Dutch person tells you something directly, don't panic. They're not attacking you. They're helping you. When someone asks your opinion, give it honestly. They actually want to know. And when someone tells you your outfit doesn't work or your idea has flaws, say thank you. Because they just saved you time, embarrassment, or money. That's not mean. That's respect. And if you still can't handle it, well, there's always France. I hear they're more polite.